The battlefield was supposed to be quiet by sunset. But on this day, the silence felt heavier than the gunfire. Inside a field hospital tent in the burning heart of Burkina Faso, a story unfolded that would soon echo across Africa. A story not of war, but of love, loyalty, and the true weight of leadership. And it all began with a single dying soldier and a president who refused to lead from afar. The evening sky bled red over the savannah, casting long shadows across the military camp. Dust swirled in the dry wind, carrying with it the scent of iron, smoke, and sacrifice. Inside the tent, lanterns flickered like fading hopes. A young soldier, Ismael, only 23, lay on a stretcher made of metal poles and worn canvas. His uniform was soaked, not in sweat, but in the price he had paid for defending his homeland. His breaths were shallow, his heartbeat weak, his dreams slipping. And next to him stood a man whose presence changed the entire atmosphere. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the revolutionary son of the soil, the president who walked the battlefield like an ordinary soldier, stepped into the tent. His fatigues were dusty. His boots still carried dried mud from the front lines. But it was his eyes that told the real story. Eyes that had stared down foreign pressure. Eyes that had defied corruption. Eyes that had faced death more than once. Now softened with something rare, human pain. Doctors straightened. Soldiers stepped back. But Traoré raised a hand. "No formalities," he said quietly. "Where is he? Where is my brother?" They led him to the far corner of the tent, where Ismael lay fighting his last battle, not against the enemy, but against time. His abdomen was wrapped heavily, the cloth turning darker with each passing minute. The medic beside him, a young woman with trembling lips, could barely speak. Her eyes were red. "He doesn't have long," she whispered. "There's nothing more we can do." Traoré inhaled sharply, like a man swallowing a storm. Ismael's eyelids fluttered. He sensed a presence, powerful, familiar. "My president," he breathed. Traoré went down on one knee, not caring about the dust that clung to his uniform. He gripped the young man's hand, a hand that trembled from both weakness and fear. "I'm here, my brother," he said softly. "I'm right here. Speak." The entire tent fell silent. No footsteps, no whispers. Even the generator seemed to fade. Only Ismael's ragged breaths remained. "I need you to tell them," Ismael whispered, each word costing him another second of life. Traoré leaned closer. "Tell who? Tell them what?" Ismael swallowed hard, pain rippling across his face. "My mother, my little sisters, in Bobo Dioulasso." He gasped, his fingers curled around Traoré's palm like a drowning man clinging to the last piece of wood. "Tell them, I didn't die for nothing. Tell them, Burkina Faso will be free." A tear escaped the medic's eye. Another soldier covered his face. Even the hardened men who had survived ambush after ambush felt their chests tighten. This wasn't just a message. It was a sacred duty, a dying man's final truth. The president's jaw clenched. His breathing trembled. This was the same man who had faced coup attempts and international threats without blinking. But Ismael's words broke through every wall. He placed a hand on the young soldier's cheek. "Look at me, Ismael," he whispered. The soldier forced his eyes open. "I will not send a minister. I will not send a letter. I will go to your home myself. I will sit with your mother. I will hold your sister's hands, and I will give them your message. Word for word." A faint smile, weak, fragile, but real, touched Ismael's lips. But little did Ibrahim Traoré know that this promise, made in a dusty tent on a fading battlefield, would lead him into a story of grief, betrayal, and a truth that would change his understanding of leadership forever. Because when he reached Ismael's home, something happened that no one expected. A single tear slid down Ibrahim Traoré's dust-covered cheek. A tear no camera captured, no journalist recorded, and no historian would ever fully understand. But in that moment, it wasn't a president who bent over Ismael's fading body. It was a brother saying goodbye. Traoré inhaled, steadying his voice. But I will tell them something else, too. His tone grew firm, like steel forged in fire. I will tell them that you were not just a soldier. You were a protector of our future, a warrior who stood when others ran, a hero who proved that Burkina Faso will never bow again. Around him, soldiers tried, and failed, to hold back their tears. The medic pressed her hand to her mouth, shoulders shaking with silent grief. Because leaders didn't say these things. Presidents didn't kneel like this. But Ibrahim Traoré was not a president formed in palaces. He was built in the dust, the bullets, and the broken promises Africa had suffered for generations. Ismael's breathing weakened. His grip loosened. His eyes fluttered like a candle fighting the wind. He tried to speak. Nothing came, but he didn't need to. His eyes said everything. Thank you. I'm not afraid anymore. Let me go in peace. Traoré leaned close, whispering about the tomorrow they had dreamed of together. A Burkina Faso, where children walked to school safely, where mothers slept without fear, where foreign puppeteers no longer pulled the strings. And then, as the sun disappeared beneath the horizon, Ismael exhaled one last quiet breath, a breath that carried his entire life, his dreams, his fears, his love for his country, into the still air of that tent. A medic gently laid a white sheet over Ismael, but Traoré didn't move. He stayed kneeling, his hand still holding Ismael's hand beneath the sheet, as though letting go would make the loss final, irreversible. His security team stood in silence. None dared speak. Protocol demanded he return to the capital. Schedules demanded meetings. The nation demanded leadership. But grief demanded something else. Finally, Traoré rose. His face was carved with grief, but his eyes held fire. He turned to his chief of staff, who had rushed in with a satellite phone, panic in his voice. "Mr. President, we need to—" "Clear my schedule," Traoré interrupted. "For when, sir?" "For tomorrow." "And what will you be doing tomorrow?" Traoré's voice dropped, quiet but unshakable. "I'm going to Bobo Dioulasso." A shocked silence swept the tent. The aide stuttered. "Sir, that is not advisable. Security risks are—" "I made a promise to a dying soldier," Traoré cut in, "and I will keep it." The words struck like lightning. Within minutes, word spread across the camp, then across social media, radio, and newsrooms. Some hailed him. This is leadership. He walks with the people. This man feels our pain. Videos of him holding Ismael's hand went viral. A leader grieving like a brother, not performing like a politician. But the critics pounced just as fast. This is political theater. He should negotiate with terrorists, not pose for sympathy. He's exploiting a dead soldier for popularity. International analysts joined in from news studios oceans away, judging a war they'd never seen, criticizing a pain they had never felt. Back inside the camp, the Minister of Defense cornered him. "You can't start a precedent like this," he warned. "What about the other families? Why not visit them too?" Traoré listened without interrupting. Then he spoke quietly. "You're right. I can't visit every family, but I will visit this one, because I gave my word. And a leader without a word is not a leader at all." Later that night, in the dim glow of a battery lamp, Traoré sat alone in his tent. In front of him lay Ismael's military ID card, A younger Ismael stared back at him from the photo, bright-eyed, hopeful, wearing a smile that had not yet known tragedy. Traoré opened his private journal, the one no one else ever read, and began writing. They say a president cannot visit every fallen soldier's family. They are right. But I can visit one. I can visit his. If my promise to a dying soldier means nothing, then my presidency means nothing. He paused, staring at the page as pain etched into the lines of his face. Outside, he heard his security officers arguing about routes, threats, and the political consequences of this trip. A colonel finally entered, worry all over his face. "Sir, Bobo Dioulasso has active terrorist cells. This is reckless. One attack, and everything we built could collapse." Traoré looked up slowly. "Colonel, how many times have you ordered young men into danger?" The colonel swallowed. "Many times, sir." "And do you believe they go because they're fearless?" "No. They go because they believe we will not abandon them, not in life, and not in death." The colonel had no response. Traoré stood, placed a hand on his shoulder. "I'm going. Make it safe, but I'm going." At dawn, a convoy of armored vehicles cut through the streets of Bobo Dioulasso. No journalists, no fanfare, no presidential banners. Because this wasn't a political visit. It was a promise in motion. A promise made in a dying soldier's final breath. A promise heavy enough to change a leader, a family, and a nation. But what awaited him in that small home on the edge of the city was something no one, not even Ibrahim Traoré, was prepared for. This journey wasn't about power. It wasn't about politics. It wasn't even about Ibrahim Traoré. It was about Ismael, his last breath, and the promise that now carried the weight of a nation. The convoy rolled into a humble neighborhood, tight dirt streets, cracked sidewalks, homes built with love rather than money. Children paused their soccer game, the ball rolling to a stop as they stared, wide-eyed. Women carrying water pots slowed, whispering as they recognized the man stepping from the vehicle. The president was here, in their street. But Traoré didn't arrive as a head of state. He arrived as a man honoring his fallen brother. He wore a plain traditional outfit, no medals, no military insignia, nothing that separated him from ordinary citizens. He ordered his security team to stay small, discreet, almost invisible. "This is not a visit of power," he had told them. "This is a visit of pain." Ismael's home was simple, a blue-painted house with a tin roof and walls faded by sun and time. But the marigolds stood tall in the front garden, blazing like tiny flames of hope. Someone had planted them with care. Someone had watered them every morning. Someone had believed in beauty even during hardship. And Traoré felt a knot in his chest. Before he could knock, the door opened. Ismael's mother stood there, wrapped in a mourning shawl. Her eyes were swollen, her face pale, her hands trembling. When she realized who stood on her doorstep, her knees weakened. She didn't see a president. She saw the man who held her son as he died. Traoré reached out, gently steadying her. "Madam," he whispered softly, "may I come in?" She couldn't respond. She simply nodded, covering her mouth as a silent cry escaped her. Inside, the house felt like a museum of Ismael's entire life. A school photo where he grinned with crooked teeth. His military academy portrait, proud and upright. A cracked shelf holding soccer trophies from childhood games. A pair of dusty boots by the door. His last pair, never to be worn again. On a worn-out sofa sat his sisters. Two young girls, barely teenagers, clinging to one another. Their eyes were red, their expressions frozen between disbelief and grief. Neighbors crowded around the windows and doorway, but the security team kept the moment sacred, still and untouched. Traoré sat across from them and simply breathed. He didn't speak like a politician. He didn't read from a paper. He spoke like a man carrying the voice of the dead. "Madam," he began quietly, "Ismael asked me to tell you something. In his final moments, he wanted you to know he did not die for nothing." The mother covered her face and sobbed, a deep, shaking cry that echoed through the small house. Traoré continued, voice trembling but controlled. "He wanted you to know that Burkina Faso will be free, that your son fought for a future he believed in." The sisters broke down, clutching each other as their tears spilled freely. The youngest whispered through sobs, "Why him? He was the kindest. He was—" Traoré leaned forward, pain etched on his face. "But you must know more," he said. "You must know the man he truly was." For the next half hour, Ibrahim Traoré did something no president had done before. He told them who Ismael was, not as a soldier, not as a casualty, but as a son. He spoke of how Ismael shared his rations with new recruits who struggled, of the way he wrote home every week, no matter how exhausted he was, of how he volunteered for the most dangerous missions, not for glory, but because, as he said, "If I don't fight for my sister's future, then who will?" The mother cried harder, each story breaking her and healing her at the same time. Traoré described the way Ismael laughed, how he lifted the spirits of men twice his age, how he believed fiercely, in a sovereign Burkina Faso. "He died with courage," Traoré said softly. "He died with purpose." The mother trembled, her voice barely a whisper. "Did he suffer?" Traoré hesitated, his eyes softened. "He was in pain, yes, but he was not alone. I held his hand, and he was at peace when he left." The family collapsed into tears again, just when the room had settled into a quiet, heavy grief. Just when the mother wiped her eyes and whispered, "Thank you for coming." A voice from the doorway broke the silence. A man stepped inside, face tense, eyes burning, fists clenched at his sides. He looked directly at the president, and in a voice filled with rage, grief, and something deeper, he said, "You shouldn't have come here." The room fell silent as Ibrahim Traoré continued, his voice low, steady, almost sacred. He didn't rush, he didn't dramatize. He simply honored a fallen son the way only a true leader could. "Let me tell you how your boy left this world." He spoke gently, carefully, as if each word carried the weight of a nation. He told them how Ismael hadn't died in fear. He had died smiling, a soft, tired smile, after Ibrahim promised him, "I will go to your mother. I will tell her myself. You will not be forgotten." When Ibrahim said those words again inside that humble blue house, the mother's hand flew to her mouth. Another sob escaped her. Not just grief, but the release of knowing her son's final moments were filled with honor, not loneliness. Traoré leaned forward. He believed in something larger than all of us, he said quietly. He believed Africans deserve the right to defend their own land, that our children should grow up free, that Burkina Faso must never kneel again, to anyone. The mother cried harder. Her daughters clung to her, tears streaming down their faces. And then, Ibrahim did something nobody expected. He reached into his pocket, slowly, carefully. First, he pulled out Ismael's military ID, worn, slightly scratched, stained with dust from the battlefield. He placed it into the mother's trembling palms. "Your son asked me to give you this." Then he reached for something else, something no one in that room could ever forget. His own rank insignia, the symbol every soldier salutes, the symbol of the commander-in-chief, the symbol of the president of Burkina Faso. He removed it from his collar. He placed it beside the ID card, with both hands, respectfully, like a sacred offering. "This," Ibrahim said softly, "was mine. But he, your son, earned it more than I ever did. He gave his life, without hesitation. Keep it, and remember this. Your son died wearing the uniform of a free nation, not a colony, not a puppet state, a free nation." The mother pressed the pin to her heart, sobbing. For the first time, she looked up at him and whispered only 2 words: "Thank you." Outside, the entire neighborhood had gone silent. No chatter, no whispers, no movement, just the sound of a country holding its breath. Children who usually played soccer stood frozen. Women who had been carrying water pots wiped their tears. Men who rarely cried fought to hold back emotion, because they realized this wasn't politics. This was humanity. And then, something broke inside Ibrahim Traoré. The youngest sister, barely 14, walked toward him with red, swollen eyes. Before anyone could stop her, she threw her arms around him. "He loved you," she cried. "He said you were the only one who could save our country." This time, Ibrahim couldn't hold back. He wrapped his arms around her like a father would. A tear rolled down his cheek. "He saved our country," Ibrahim whispered. "Ismael, and all the brave souls like him. I only try to be worthy of them." The entire house dissolved into tears, not of misery, but of unity, of pride, of something deeper than grief, something that felt like the birth of a new Africa. Outside, the people who had gathered wiped their eyes. Some placed hands on their hearts, others whispered prayers, and somewhere, on a simple mobile phone held by a neighbor who couldn't look away, a video was recording. A video that would soon explode across Africa. "I saw our president cry with a mother who lost her son," the neighbor wrote when posting it online. "Real tears, real grief. This is leadership." Within hours, millions of views. Within days, translated worldwide. Across Africa, from Senegal to South Africa, people shared it with one sentence: "This is what African leadership looks like." But the impact didn't stop online. In military barracks across Burkina Faso, soldiers watched the video together. Hardened men who had seen war silently wiped their eyes. For years, many had wondered if their sacrifices mattered. If they died, would anyone remember them? But seeing their president in that tiny, faded blue house, seeing him weep over a fallen soldier, everything changed. Recruitment applications tripled within weeks. Not because of money, not because of glory, but because for the first time, young Burkinabe believed, "If I fall, my story will not die. My family will not be abandoned. My life will have meaning." Ismael's mother became a symbol of dignity, of loss, of national pride. She gave only one interview, not for fame, but for truth. Sitting in her simple home surrounded by flowers people had left at her door, she said, "The president didn't have to come. He could have sent a minister or a letter, but he came himself because he promised my son. In our culture, a promise to the dying is sacred, and he honored it." She lifted the collar pin in her hand. "This will stay in my family forever. My grandchildren will know that leaders can be good, that promises can be kept." And across Africa, something began to shift. For decades, the world had tried to tell Africans what leadership should look like. But that day, in that tiny house, the narrative changed. Leadership now had tears. Leadership now had humility. Leadership now had a human face. And that face was Ibrahim Traoré. For decades, the world had repeated the same story about Africa. A story written by people who did not live here, did not bleed here, did not understand here. They said African leaders were corrupt. They said Africans were incapable of leading themselves. They said intervention was necessary. as if the continent were a child that couldn't stand without holding someone's hand. But Ibrahim Traoré's quiet visit to a grieving family broke that narrative into dust. He didn't bring cameras. He didn't give speeches. He didn't hide behind walls and guards. He walked into a humble home, sat on a simple couch, and cried with a mother who had lost everything. This was not the act of a dictator. This was not the act of a man hungry for power. This was the act of a leader who understood that power means nothing if you cannot kneel beside the broken. International observers who had once called him another coup leader suddenly found themselves speechless, because dictators rule from distance. But Traoré, he ruled from the heart. African intellectuals recognized the moment immediately. They raised their voices across universities, radio stations, youth movements, and parliaments. Africa needs space to follow leaders like him. The story spread like a flame, not through official press releases, but through the voices of students, workers, mothers, soldiers, farmers, the people. And slowly, a question began to arise across the continent: leadership rooted in humility, humanity, and honor? 6 months after that unforgettable day in Bobo Dioulasso, a monument was built. Not to celebrate a president, not to glorify battle, not to carve power into stone, but to honor a 23-year-old soldier named Ismael and the countless others who had given their lives so Burkina Faso could breathe free. At the center of the monument, engraved in bold letters, were the final words he spoke. "I didn't die for nothing. Burkina Faso will be free." On the day of the unveiling, thousands gathered, soldiers in clean uniforms, mothers with babies tied to their backs, students holding flags, old men leaning on canes, entire families holding hands. The air was heavy, not with sadness, but with pride, sacred pride. As the cloth fell and the monument shone in the sunlight, the crowd fell silent. A silence more powerful than any anthem. Ibrahim Traoré stepped forward. He didn't speak like a president addressing a nation. He spoke like a guardian of truth. "We built this," he said softly, "not to praise war, but to remember why we fight. We fight so our children will never have to. We fight because Burkina Faso must stand on its own feet. We fight because Ismael believed we could." He turned, looked at Ismael's mother, now standing tall, filled with a quiet, dignified strength, and said, "Madam, your son's message has been delivered, and it will be delivered again and again to every generation after us. Burkina Faso will be free." When the ceremony ended, something extraordinary happened. People did not go home. They lined up, entire families, to meet Ismael's mother and sisters, to shake their hands, to hug them, to whisper thank you for a sacrifice that had protected a whole nation. And many approached Ibrahim Traoré too, not as citizens bowing before power, but as human beings honoring another human being. One old woman, her spine bent with age and wisdom, walked up to him slowly. She looked up at him with eyes that had seen more pain than any history book could record. "My grandson is in the army," she said softly. "If something happens to him, I know now that he matters. Thank you for showing us that our children's lives are sacred." Traoré's face softened. He held her hands gently. "They have always been sacred, grandmother," he whispered. "I'm only trying to make sure our nation never forgets it. And that is why this story will echo across time. Because in a world where leaders chase power, money, and applause, Ibrahim Traoré chose something different. He chose to keep a promise. He chose humanity over pride. He chose compassion over comfort. He chose to carry the memory of one fallen soldier, as if it were the weight of the whole nation. And that is what true leadership is. Not a title, not a uniform, not a throne, but the courage to see the humanity in others, to honor even the smallest life, to treat a fallen soldier not as a statistic, but as a son, a brother, a hero. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that real leadership still exists, if it showed you that a promise kept can heal an entire nation, share this story. Let the world see what African leadership truly looks like. Let others remember Ismael. Let others believe again. And subscribe for more powerful stories. Stories of leaders who choose integrity over image, compassion over convenience, humanity over power. These are not just stories. They are proof that a better world is possible, one promise at a time. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. And thank you for remembering Ismael.